So tonight, we're going to be talking about one of the quiet contributors to pain. Now, many of us struggle with pain. Pain is a real struggle. Yes, Kaytee Hadley is here. She's going to be sharing her on how gut imbalances can be a silent contributor to a lot of our chronic inflammation as well as our pain. Kaytee is a functional medicine dietitian and the founder of Holistic Health and Wellness. Kaytee really does support people who are struggling with gut imbalances, depression, and anxiety. She helps them find their true healing by addressing the root causes to their symptoms through nutrition and lifestyle. So I would like to welcome Kaytee.
Thank you so much for having me, Amy. It's such a pleasure to be here with you today.
Wonderful. I am so excited for this conversation. I know that it really will connect to a lot of our listeners. But before we get started, I want to make sure that we're just going through a quick disclaimer. All the information that Kaytee and I are providing to you is meant to be informational. It's not meant to substitute your need to consult with a physician or a medical provider. It's not meant to give you diagnoses. It merely is educational information. And both Kaytee and I will be giving you information to the best of our knowledge. And if there's something that we don't know, we're going to definitely let you know that we don't know what the answer is to that. But as we go on through tonight, Kaytee and I will be having a discussion. I'm going to be asking questions to Kaytee regarding some hot topics that many of our clients ask us. And then we ultimately want to hear from you guys. So if you have specific questions regarding to your own gut related issues, anything health and wellness related or pain related, we want you to be adding those in the comment section, and we'll be taking time to answer those throughout the evening. So Kaytee, are you ready to get started?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. So I think that many people really don't even realize that their gut could be contributing to their pain and inflammation. So when you're looking at someone, what symptoms could indicate that there might be gut imbalances and or the need for them to receive some form of gut support?
Yeah, that's a really good point. When we think of gut symptoms, we automatically think diarrhea, constipation, bloating, all these symptoms that no one really wants to talk all that much about. But symptoms of gut imbalances can actually show up all over the body. So yes, and your traditional gut symptoms like that, changes in bowel movement, things like that. But they can also show up pain, inflammation, actually in other areas of the body. Hormonal imbalances, we'll talk more about that coming up, and how gut health plays a role actually in hormone balance. Also acne, the skin, getting sick often because our immune system, 70% of that is in the gut. Also our mental health, anxiety, depression, because of the gut-brain connection. So in these simple and also the complicated answer, it's kind of everywhere. They can really show up everywhere. Gut impacts all areas of the body. It's really at the center of wellness.
Yeah, and I think that's something really important for people to understand, that it can show up in many different ways. It's not maybe just constipation, diarrhea, or bloating, or gas, or anything like that that people relate to gut. I think there are a lot of things that can contribute to a lot of the pain and discomfort that a lot of our clients do feel. So it really does seem like a lot of these gut symptoms are so common nowadays. From your perspective, can you explain a little bit more on what you feel some of the causes of these gut imbalances are?
Yeah, so much contributes to our gut health. Going back to the way we were born, whether it was vaginal birth or C-section, whether we were breastfed or bottle fed, and then our current lifestyle, the way that we eat, the way that we move, the way that we sleep, our stress, all of these different current lifestyle factors also impact gut health. So we have childhood history, we have our lifestyle, we also have medications like antibiotics can really wipe out the gut microbiome. So that also affects it. Then we have things like vitamin and mineral status, because the gut needs certain vitamins and minerals to really function optimally. And then even other medical conditions, things like hypothyroidism, Hashimoto's, that can really impact the gut as well. So there are so many aspects to gut health. We really have to think about it holistically. Mm-hmm. And that's why it can be so challenging to, identify, well, what's causing it? Well, it's likely a combination of many things. It's likely something that was kind of building and has been building. And often there's one trigger. It might be you get food poisoning and then it's all kind of over. It might be you got a concussion. That concussion actually affects the gut. So again, it's many things and all of the things at once. And that's why a holistic approach is so key, to make sure that we're addressing it from all areas.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that's one thing that we talk about from a myofascial perspective as well is, everyone's always looking for that one thing that caused it. Yeah. And a lot of times it's not necessarily one thing. It's the combination of the history of what has happened over a lifetime. And then it takes that one thing that tips over the iceberg that now brings someone into a chronic state. And it sounds like what you're finding with gut health, it's very similar and very much the same.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Good. So I'm going to warn everyone, our conversation is going to get a little bit more graphic, but both Kaytee and I do feel that this is an extremely important area for everyone to know and to have a better understanding of. You had mentioned diarrhea, you had mentioned constipation. So these are some things that come up a lot with our clients. They come in and they say, I'm constipated. Can you talk a little bit more on what is normal when it comes to bowel movements, frequency, consistency, all of that? Can you talk a little bit more on that so our listeners do have a better understanding of what they should be seeing?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the first thing is we have to look.
Right? Otherwise you won't know. I laughed earlier when you were saying I was going to get graphic because I talk about poop all day. It's just so normal. And, it does make people so uncomfortable, but it's such just a natural thing. So yes, let's talk about it. What is normal? Well, yes, the first thing is you have to be interested and you have to look. One thing that I really think about is what is normal versus what is optimal. And I always make this distinction for everything, whether it's, vitamin D levels in the body or, bowel movements. We want to think about what's normal versus optimal. So normal, textbook normal, is anywhere from 3 times a day to 3 times a week is considered normal. Okay. I personally, I like to get much more specific with that and think about what's ideal, what's optimal. So there's a couple different aspects to it. The first one is the frequency, right? I believe that having at least one complete bowel movement every day is really important. And one of the reasons for that is the ideal transit time. So from the time that you eat something till it leaves your body is really 12 to 24 hours. If it's taking longer than that, a few things can happen, right? So that means our transit is too slow. That can cause certain types of bacterial overgrowth because things aren't moving fast enough. It can also cause a recycling of toxins in the body that we would excrete otherwise. And it can also cause a recycling of hormones. Again, this hormonal imbalance piece that I mentioned earlier. If it's too fast, if food is going through us faster than that, it can mean that we're not absorbing all of the nutrients. And it can also cause dehydration, right? If we're losing fluids and electrolytes because of the diarrhea. So at least once a day, maybe 2 or 3 times a day, depending on what feels good for you in your body and taking in these other considerations. So there's the frequency. Color, we want brown, maybe a little bit of green if you're eating a lot of green veg. If you eat beets and it turns a little bit red for a day, don't freak out. I've had that come up a lot. And then consistency. So we want our stools to be like a snake, so smooth and connected, or like a log, so maybe some cracks in it. We don't want the pebbles, and we don't want like pudding or coffee, right? So those are like the 2 extremes. Then we also want to think about urgency. Is it something that we're running to the bathroom, we can't control it, or are we sitting there for hours straining to go, right? It should be relatively easy, but we know when we need to go. And then finally, it should feel pretty complete. So it shouldn't feel like we're going into the bathroom multiple times a day and we can't really fully eliminate. It feels complete in that way. So those are the things that I think about when I think about, again, what is ideal when it comes to bowel movements.
Yeah, and some things that I have kind of discussed with clients before is, and I'm sure that you've seen this and maybe you have some comments on it, but as a reference, I've a lot of times had people look at the Bristol stool
Exactly.
chart, because it does give pictures. It does give, if it's like this could be possibly going on. You know, if you have those rabbit pellets or rabbit turds that are just little pellets, you know, we probably need more hydration. And, you know, so that can be really helpful. Do you recommend that for your clients as well?
Yeah, absolutely. The Bristol Stool chart is a really great visual to look at. And some of them will even have like, you know, kind of the analogies that I use, like pebbles or coffee or dumplings or snakes, right? And some of
Mhm.
them I've seen like the version with candy bars. So depending on who you are, what seems more appropriate for you, or even for kids, this is really helpful for kids to
Yeah.
can really help you kind of identify. One thing, you know, the Bristol Stool chart is great in that it can say like, yeah, we need a little bit more fiber or water here. But what it might not be accounting for is if there are deeper underlying imbalances that
Yeah.
aren't related to nutrition, like small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, things like that, which we can talk more about. But it's
Yeah.
a really good visual.
Yeah. Yeah. And how does someone, I mean, obviously, certain foods that you eat will show up in a stool. Like you said, the beets, or maybe kale or spinach will show up as a little bit of green. But how is there a way that someone can get a better understanding of the transit time
Yeah,
at
yeah.
home?
Yeah, I love that question. So you can use beets as one way you could do it. You can also use white sesame seeds. You
Mm,
drink them just in water, not ground, not chewed. Drink them whole. You can also use charcoal tablets. And
okay.
essentially, you would take whatever food it is, a couple beets or a couple tablespoons of the sesame seeds, and you want to think about, okay, it's this time that I ate them. And then you want to look at your stool every time you go to the bathroom and see when is the first time I see it in my stool and when is the last time I see it in my stool. And that's going to give you a really good
Mhm.
indication of your
Okay.
transit time, simple at home way to measure.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that. Um, you have talked about the fact that how do you typically identify which imbalances are kind of present within someone, and how do you address them?
Yeah. So we want to look at the body really holistically. So let me explain my process a little bit so you can understand the thinking behind this. So, when I first meet with someone, we do a really in depth health history. So, first off, right, looking at medical history, see if there's anything else that's tied in, looking at current lifestyle, current nutrition, movement, sleep, stress, all of that.
Mhm.
And look at again that childhood, birth, kind of all of these different factors that tie in. Just by looking at that, we can already start to paint this picture of what are things that have been contributing to gut health and or imbalances long term and now. Then we want to look at what are the current symptoms, what's currently going on, how often are you going to the bathroom, what are other symptoms, right, the bloating, and then also, like I mentioned, it can show up other ways in the body. So looking at that as a whole, different types of imbalances present in different ways, but there is some overlap. So we can start to kind of narrow it down and think about, okay, it seems more like this or more like this, right? Generally thinking. If we want to really dive deep, we can do stool testing. Now, there are different types of stool testing. I only ever recommend the ones that medical practitioners can order because those are just going to be more reputable and accurate. And of course, you have someone to support you in that journey. But
Mhm.
essentially, we can look at parasites, we can look and other things that really just shouldn't be in there. We can look at if there's an overgrowth of bacteria or not enough of others. We can look at how you're digesting your different nutrients. So these stool tests can really be helpful. There are other types of tests, such as breath tests. These help identify small intestinal bacterial overgrowth or methanogenic overgrowth. And so those are the two main ones. There are other ones, but I would say those are the two main ones. So essentially, we're looking at the products of your gut, whether it's your stool, whether it's your breath, believe it or not, these different aspects, and that can give us some insights.
Great. I just want to let you know that we had someone comment, and with the transit time, they thought it was a great idea and they thanked you for that.
Oh,
So,
good. Yeah, you're welcome.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So, you know, I've seen a lot of different people over the years, and many of these people just feel like they have to deal with these gut issues, that they're just kind of normal, and they may not really understand the long-term effects. You're talking about kind of people that are in long-term or chronic or severe symptoms. Who do you consider to be more of kind of those chronic long-term individuals, and those individuals that should be seeking advice compared to, and I don't want to say normal because none of it's normal. We want optimal. But when should someone be more looking and seeking some advice?
Yes. So many people are dealing with gut symptoms. And one thing that's often very discouraging is folks are often told, it's just IBS, like just deal with it, or I'll manage your stress, or we did a colonoscopy and everything looks okay, so there's nothing we can do. But there really is a lot more we can do. And in fact, most people, nutrition isn't even a part of the topic or a part of the conversation. Neither is movement, neither is any of these aspects that we've been talking about that are so important. So anything more than a couple days, it's again pretty probably normal if you're traveling, eating different foods, right? You have a little bit of gut upset, but anything more than that, where you're dealing with this on a regular or semi-regular basis, I would say is really worth looking into, in my opinion. One thing that I do hear a lot is, oh, I have these flare-ups, but then things are okay for a month or so. And then, but it comes back. And if it's always coming back, it's recurrent, something is going on under there. For example, parasites, it's very common that certain times of the moon cycles, during the full moon, people with parasites actually have more gut issues because of the different the changes in the earth. It's fascinating. It's really fascinating.
Yeah.
So if it's coming and going, look into it. If it's always there, look into it. Really anything more than what seems to you, knowing your life and what could be triggering. But also remembering that sometimes acute issues like food poisoning can actually cause long-term downstream consequences. So
yeah, and I think in today's society, we get so busy that we tend to not be mindful or aware of these patterns. And when something comes on and then it goes away, it comes on and goes away, we just kind of think it's a fluke. So I think a lot of times in those instances, keeping a journal and keeping a stool journal or a symptom journal, so that you can look back and you can see where these patterns are happening. Because as we all know, life happens and we definitely just forget about things. And when they go away, out of sight, out of mind, we really don't take them into consideration. So that's something that I would kind of add to that is I think if you are having any type of gut issues or even any general pain related issues, keep a journal so that you can notice what is happening each and every day.
Absolutely. A journal is great. Also, doing a symptom questionnaire that looks at your whole body. If you're finding symptoms in multiple areas of your body, I would say think about the gut. Again, knowing that the gut is really at the center of health. If you're, let's say, dealing with, arthritic symptoms like inflammation, pain in the joints, maybe some brain fog, maybe some fatigue, anxiety, upset stomach, like these different areas, like they're all connected, and the gut is really at the center of them. The other thing I would say would be a big kind of red flag in terms of look into this would be if you're doing the things for lifestyle, but you're not getting improvement, or maybe you had some improvement, but it's not fully resolved. So let's say, you started doing all the things that people say about managing your stress and eating well, and it's still there. That is a big sign that something more is going on underneath the surface. We mentioned water and fiber. If you're doing those things and it's still there, keep looking. And
Yeah.
I would also say, try not to be discouraged if you're told we haven't found it yet.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is a great time to kind of let people know that we're here with Kaytee and we're talking all things related to gut health and chronic pain and inflammation. So we want to hear from you guys. If you have any questions related to gut health, any general health and wellness, any pain related questions, go ahead and throw them in the comments and we're going to be answering them throughout our talk tonight. So moving on to kind of our next topic is, I feel like a lot of my clients that come in, many of them are seeing, say, a traditional doctor for, or have seen a traditional doctor for their gut related issues. And many of them are on the same protocol when it comes to their gut health. You know, if you're constipated, take Miralax. If you have acid reflux, take this medicine. But I feel like a lot of these people, they're just focusing on these symptoms that they have, but they're never truly kind of getting at that root cause that you tend to kind of look for. How is your approach a little bit different when it comes to these imbalances? And is there a framework or something that you use when treating these conditions?
Yeah. So, I mean, you said it really well. It's about identifying the root cause versus managing the symptoms, right? If we think of it as a tree and our symptoms are the tree and whatever's causing it is the root, we worry about, oh, these leaves are browning and let's prune this and get rid of this, but the tree is going to keep becoming diseased and dying and having those symptoms if the roots aren't getting the nutrients it needs, right? If they're not in good soil. So I'm really interested in what's in the soil, what's at the root cause of the symptoms. There's a general framework that I use. It's very functional medicine based. It's called the 5R approach. And we do this for all of the conditions and whatever the symptoms are because it fits them all. It's essentially, what are the 5 things that we're looking at, okay? Now, again, we individualize this based on the person's unique health and lifestyle. So we want to remove anything in the gut that shouldn't be there. Again, pathogenic bacteria, parasites, things like that. Got to get rid of whatever is there that shouldn't be there. We also want to replace if something's missing. Again, this could be a particular strain of bacteria, but it's often digestive enzymes, stomach acid, things like that help us digest, substances like that help us digest our food and our nutrients. We want to replace those. We also want to repair the gut lining. Oftentimes the gut lining can become permeable or quote unquote leaky. And this can cause more food sensitivities and more of an inflammatory response and an immune reaction. So we want to repair the gut lining. We also want to re-inoculate. This would be getting that really good balance of bacteria in the gut. If we think of it like a community, we want diversity. We want shops and locals and all of these different types of businesses and people living there. That makes for a healthy community. And then the 5th R is we want to rebalance. This refers to actually rebalancing the lifestyle so that we have the nutrition, the movement, the sleep, the stress, all balanced for that individual. And this is for short-term and for long-term, right? Because once we get rid of those symptoms, we want them to stay gone. Once we heal the gut, we want it to stay healed. We don't want this person going back in and, continuing to struggle with this. We have to find that new balance. So those are the 5 R's, right? Remove, replace, repair, re-inoculate, and rebalance. This is both a short and a long-term plan, meaning when we first get started, there's often short-term therapeutic interventions right away, right? Again, let's take the example of a parasite. If there's a parasite, we want to get that thing out of there right away. That's not something that's going to go on, hopefully long-term. Hopefully we can get rid of it pretty soon and focus on some of the other areas. So again, there's a short-term piece, but then the long-term piece might be, okay, these are some things we can start doing with your nutrition more long-term. It just kind of becomes the way that you eat that's really going to foster your gut health. Or these are ways that you can start moving your body long-term that are going to be a little bit better for gut health than what you've been doing. So taking that personalized approach.
Great. I love that. And it's a personalized approach because there is, just as we believe with the people that we treat fascially, there are no 2 people that are the same. Everyone's testing may come back. They may have similar things going on, but their lifestyle and their different things that are contributing to that may be very different. So I think an individualized approach is extremely important for these individuals.
Yeah.
So many of our clients have been dealing with gut issues for years. They've been on the same regimen, same medications, but they keep taking them, but that's not really yielding any change in their symptoms. What would you kind of say to this individual that really feels like they've done everything they can for these over these years, but they still really haven't made the change? They still really haven't found the healing that they're looking for. And they're fed up, they're frustrated. They've given up hope. They just feel like it's just something they have to live with. What would you say to those individuals?
Well, first of all, I've been there, so I sympathize. I really do. And, we're often told that our gut symptoms are normal because so many people have them. But again, it doesn't mean that it's ideal for you. And just because you've been told everything looks fine or everything looks normal or you're fine, it simply means that we haven't found what's going on yet. And I truly believe that. I truly believe, everyone's healing journey is going to look different. And, maybe every single person based on their lifestyle, maybe they can't have the perfect picture of gut health their whole life, right? Because we all come from different backgrounds and different influences. But if we haven't found it, that's different from there's nothing wrong. If you are experiencing symptoms, there's something going on, right? A symptom literally means it's a symptom of something else. So what is the something else? What is causing it? And so I'd really just encourage folks who have been told that there's nothing they can do to really think again and to really look for a practitioner who believes in that and who believes in you and who believes you, right? Because if you're told you're fine, I know how incredibly discouraging and invalidating that is to be told everything looks fine, just deal with it, when you're like, I'm in pain or my quality of life is suffering or whatever it is for you. If you know there's something going on, chances are you're right. You know your body better than anyone else. And having again a practitioner who's going to listen to you and have you be a part of your healing process and have you be a part of your team, that's really essential. So I would really just encourage you to stick with it and get the support around you that you need and that you deserve, because there really is healing.
Absolutely. And, I know when we've talked in the past, I know kind of the experience that you've gone through, and, good for you for keeping going and looking outside of that box of that normal traditional treatment. Do you want to share anything of what you went through? Because it may help some of our listeners, what you went through.
Yeah. So I dealt with for many years chronic anxiety, major depression, and constant GI symptoms. I mean, from the time I was a kid till my early 20s, and I was sick a lot. I was on antibiotics all the time. No one really thought to connect these different symptoms that I was experiencing. I went to multiple GI specialists. I had a colonoscopy done when I was like 21 years old. I was just told, manage your stress, manage your stress. That's about it. I was kept being told there's nothing wrong.
Yeah.
Maybe it's IBS. I finally found a functional medicine practitioner who did some more in-depth testing. I mean, first of all, she believed me, and that was like, oh my gosh, okay, yes, all right, here we go. Yeah. We did some functional testing. I had 2 different types of parasites, a pathogenic bacteria. I had small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. I had intestinal permeability, and I had multiple unknown food sensitivities. All of that had been going on for who knows. I mean, I had symptoms for 15 years.
Yeah.
And when I got those results, I literally was on cloud 9. And when she was, talking about them, and I was just thrilled and I was over the moon, she's like, why are you happy about these results? It's like, because I feel validated. Mm-hmm. Like, it's showing up. Like, we finally found where to look, and it's there. It was just, we hadn't looked in the right places. And because she believed in me and she was willing to keep digging, we identified, what was going on. And that made just the biggest difference in my health. I mean, my mental health, my physical health, my immune health, just everything. So yeah, when people come to me and they're like, I've been told everything's okay, but it's not, I feel that. Yeah. I really do.
Yeah. And again, it's unfortunate that anyone has to go through that, and that you had to go through that. But being your advocate, and I just want to share kind of some of the comments that have come through. Someone agreed, be your own advocate, ask questions.
Yeah.
Feeling heard is so important. Absolutely. Sometimes you need to keep searching. Sometimes you need to keep reaching out. And sometimes that path takes you in different ways. It might not be a linear path. You may have to all of a sudden take a veer off to the side, and you connect with that person that is exactly the person that you need in that moment. And so keep searching, and you always, always want to be going to someone that you feel is listening to you. I experienced a lot of this going through my hand surgery, and I've shared my experience with a lot of people on the Facebook group, and you want to keep searching. And, and it's frustrating. About a month ago, I had a client come in, and she had gone to a new pain management facility, and was basically told her pain wasn't related to what she was saying it was related to, that it was all in her head. And I saw that client spiral big time down a huge rabbit hole. And I had to do a lot of work and a lot of effort. I'm glad I was there to be able to do that, to be able to support her and help her see that it was not just a mental aspect, that there was a physical component to this. But to have any practitioner do that to someone, if you ever have that happen to you, turn out the door and run and look for someone else.
Yeah.
No one should ever go into a medical practitioner and not feel supported, not feel heard, and not feel helped. So
glad.
I'm going to step off my soapbox on that.
No, oh my gosh. Keep preaching, because we need to hear that, because so many of us have dealt with that. And, I'm glad you brought up the aspect of it's all in your head. I've worked with quite a few folks who have a very similar story, in that they were dealing with anxiety and or depression at the same time as their gut symptoms. And they were told, it's in your head. It's because you're so worked up. It's because you're so anxious. It's because you're so depressed that your gut symptoms are happening. Now, the gut and brain, like I mentioned, are very much connected, right? We have the gut-brain axis. They communicate to each other, right? We've all probably experienced, right? You're nervous and you kind of feel butterflies in your stomach, right? So we know they're connected.
Yeah.
But the gut sends more signals to the brain than the brain is sending to the gut. So oftentimes the anxiety, depression, they're actually a result of the gut being imbalanced, or at least in part, right? It's contributing. So when you're told it's in your head, it's incredibly deceiving, because yes, they're connected, but you might be thinking about it the wrong way, right? Yeah. It might actually be coming from the gut, going up to the brain, sending the brain these signals to feel more anxious, to feel more depressed, to feel more fatigued. So using this verbiage of it's in your head as a way to diminish the symptoms, it's completely out of balance. It is. Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Well, let's move on to the next.
Okay.
So you and I know that sometimes the smallest changes can make a huge impact in our overall health in our body. Are there 2 to 3 things from a nutritional aspect that our listeners can take away and start implementing immediately that can help at least get them on the path to support their gut health?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So nutrition is one of these key lifestyle aspects that is just essential for optimal gut health. I mean, when we eat, it's literally also feeding our gut bacteria too, right? Mm-hmm. And our gut microbiome. So a couple things to be thinking about. So one of them is, I think everyone has probably heard the term probiotics before. This is a very like poppy kind of, right? Ooh, take your probiotics. Okay. So probiotics are essentially the bacteria in the gut. And we do want, like I mentioned, a diverse community, right? Mm-hmm. if we take a probiotic pill, it's kind of like travelers in our community, right? We swallow the probiotic and like maybe they shop locally and then they like, you know, help our community, our economy, and then they're gone. And if they don't ever really come back, there's not a lot we can do. In that way, taking probiotics in like a pill form can be short-term therapeutically beneficial if you know exactly what strain you're taking and exactly for what purpose. It's not a one size fits all.
Yeah.
But to actually build up our community and have people buy homes and settle down and raise families, get jobs, we actually want to eat foods that are high in probiotics because they're more likely actually to stick around and populate the gut. So all of that is to say, eat fermented foods if you can, because these naturally contain the probiotics. So things like yogurt, whether that's plant-based or dairy, tempeh, miso, sauerkraut, any of these fermented foods that you have to keep in the refrigerator that have these live active cultures, that's the probiotics. Now, there are a couple conditions and medications where fermented foods aren't advised. So again, check with your healthcare practitioner. Mm-hmm. Now that the probiotics, the bacteria are there, we want to feed them. And we do that by eating fiber. The bacteria eat fiber and then they'll stick around in the gut. So in order to eat more fiber, just focus on plants. Lots of colorful, diverse plants is really going to help the probiotics flourish and build that community. So it doesn't have to be vegetables, can be fruits, can be whole grains, beans and lentils, nuts and seeds. And these, why I say colorful is because the colors in foods actually represent their nutrients. So if you focus on lots of colorful plants, you're going to be getting lots of different nutrients to feed your body, the fiber to feed the gut, you eat the fermented foods and you get the bacteria in there. And it's just like, again, this little community. The third piece that I would recommend is hydrating. Mm-hmm. Drinking enough water to stay hydrated is absolutely key for overall health, for gut health, and also for helping the fiber do what it's supposed to do, keep healthy bowel movements. So fiber, colorful plants, and fermented water, colorful plants, and fermented foods.
Love it. And I love your analogy with the community because it's easy to understand. It makes total sense. So, now, I know a lot of these are general recommendations, but a lot of individuals that do have chronic gut imbalances may need that support from a professional. But these are always excellent strategies for people to at least try at home first. See if they make a difference. If they aren't making a difference, then we need to move on and seek from that professional. I also want to comment with the fermented foods. I think one of the important things that you pointed out that people may not have caught is it has to be refrigerated. You can't go to the shelf and get the whatever that sauerkraut on the shelf in the can. That's not going to be the same as what you're going to get in the refrigerator. Am I correct in that thinking?
Yep, absolutely. Same thing with like jarred pickles, right?
Yeah. Perfect. So I do want to say that we are here with Kaytee and we are answering your questions regarding gut health, chronic pain, inflammation, any general health and wellness. So this will kind of be your last chance that if you have any questions, go ahead and throw them into the comments section and we'll go ahead and answer them. But I do want to just share a couple of one that came in. Someone learned how much gut health is tied to the emotional health besides just their myofascial release. And I don't know if you want to comment on this, but I would say absolutely. Do you want to comment at all on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I mentioned, right? So the gut sends a lot of signals to the brain and it's just involved in so much. Like there's many different ways from like a biochemical standpoint of, well, how exactly does the gut communicate with the brain? And honestly, I don't even know that it's worth like, if you're a total nerd like me, like you can totally dive into like, oh, well, these neurotransmitters do this and like this does this. But the point is, like this person mentioned, gut health is going to be involved in your emotions, your energy, your mood, right? sometimes you just feel off. That's coming from somewhere. And that's not to diminish, of course, actual psychological like trauma and things like that.
Absolutely.
Of course, it all has its place. And absolutely had its place in my journey as well. But again, we have to think about the mind and body are one. This idea that we have of mental health care versus physical health care, it's non-existent. The brain is a part of the body, just like my arm is, right? So to think that we could treat mental health as different from physical health is kind of silly because they both impact each other as one. So gut health and emotional health, absolutely key. And I'm so glad that people are starting to tune into this. And when you think about it, you're like, oh, duh, right? Like my brain is a part of my body. But because of this kind of dichotomous relationship that we've artificially kind of created, we tend to think of them different, but they're not.
Yeah, and I think in traditional, more of a traditional setting of medicine, they've been taught to separate them out. And you absolutely can't. The mind-body connection is real, and it's really important. We have another question that came in. I'm going to put it up on the screen. Thank you, Donna. Is water with added electrolytes really more helpful than tap water for someone who is chronically dehydrated?
Really good question. So what happens is, so it depends. What is the dehydration coming from? If it's coming from diarrhea or sweating a lot, you're going to be losing those electrolytes, right? Your sodium, your potassium, your magnesium, those are going to be leaving your body with that. If that's not happening and you're simply just not drinking enough water, but you're eating well and you're not really sweating a lot, you're not having diarrhea, it might not be so helpful. It might just be you need more water. But if the water is leaving your body in the form of some kind of fluid, you're losing the electrolytes along with it. And if you're doing that in excess, like it's really hot outside, right? Or you're using the sauna or you're exercising a lot, or again, you have diarrhea, that would be when the electrolyte replacement is really going to be important. Because what happens is if we lose the water and the electrolytes, but we only replace the water, we're essentially kind of diluting our blood. And this can actually cause brain swelling and all kinds of, right? This is sometimes happens with athletes. So that's why replacing the electrolytes, if we're losing them, is essential. If you're not losing them to begin with, probably not necessary.
And I want to comment on that as well, is if someone, I'm not going to comment on the electrolyte aspect, but if someone is intaking enough hydration throughout the day, but they still don't feel that they are hydrated, that they are chronically dehydrated, I would also be looking at the potentially the fascial component to that, because from a myofascial standpoint, we also are looking all the way down to the cellular level, and the cellular level is filled by, it's mainly fluid and water based. But if now you have developed many adhesions that have turned more rigid or more solid in shape, what's going to happen is it's kind of like you're pouring, every time you drink, it's kind of like pouring water on a rock. It's never going to absorb. It's never going to be able to get into where it needs to get into. And so when we do the myofascial work as well, if you have that chronic fascial restriction, it's kind of like allowing rehydration of the area, but it is also going to turn the area more fluid and more spongy. And so now everything can start to absorb. That's like supplements and medications and things like that as well. And so I would just take that aspect too. If you're dealing with a lot of chronic pain and things like that, we might want to look at someone from a myofascial standpoint as well. So
that's so fascinating and so valuable. I'm so glad you pointed that out. This is why I love these discussions, right? We're both coming from these different places, and so many good gems in here.
Absolutely. So speaking of gems, let's go into what are your top 3 thoughts in relation to gut health and chronic pain that people can kind of take away from today? And then I'll give kind of my top 3.
In terms of like lifestyle action items?
It could be anything. Action items, it could be lifestyle. Just what do you feel are your 3 top things in relation to gut health and pain?
So in terms of what to be thinking about, things that you can start doing now. So think about, again, thinking about everything is connected and thinking about this holistically. So 1, consider your nutrition, focusing on primarily plants as close to their natural state as possible, right? Not super hyper processed foods. Thinking about a consistent movement practice that is suitable for you and your body. Too much, too little, right? There's a sweet spot. Also think about your sleep. We want to be sleeping enough. 7 to 9 hours is, yes, it is the real number. I know people think it's like 4 or 5, but it is 7 to 9. And making sure
and quality sleep,
yes,
not just laying in bed.
Make sure that you're actually feeling rested when you wake up, and that you're doing it at night. That's actually really key. Having the circadian rhythm out of sync with the sun really plays a role. So sleeping enough and sleeping well and sleeping at night, this plays a role in gut health as well. So movement, nutrition, sleep. And then I would also be thinking about stress and the role that stress plays in your life. Stress can be psychological stress. Again, it could be too much exercise. It could be not enough sleep. It could be a lot of fasting. Stress comes in a lot of different forms. And so thinking about how much stress is going on in your life, and if it's at the point where it's too much, a little bit of stress is good for us, right? We pick up some weight, that's stressful on our muscles, but it leads to stronger muscles. So stress is that last piece because it does affect gut health. And at the end of the day, remembering that everything is connected in your body. And if you feel like something isn't right, something's probably not right.
Yeah. So my top 3, going off what Kaytee said, is we need to get moving. That's a really important one. As a society, we tend to be pretty sedentary. Our bodies need movement. It craves movement. Our joints need it, our muscles need it, as well as it is really beneficial for our gut motility. So depending upon your physical status of maybe pain or things like that, we always are encouraging individuals. If we've been sitting or sedentary, we want to get up every 30, 45 minutes and just move. Whether that be, we call it the hallelujah stretch, where you just kind of move and stretch back. Walk down the hallway at home. If you're at work, walk to the bathroom or walk to the end of the block, just something to get movement. Being stagnant and sedentary can have a really big impact on our gut, as well as our overall just physicality of how our body feels. My second one, which would piggyback off what Kaytee said too, is hydration. Most of us aren't well hydrated, and this can definitely have an impact on our fascial system, but also on our stool. So I'm going to ask Kaytee this, and what is your recommendation for the amount of, let's say, ounces? Because there's a lot of controversy out there, and I think a lot of people don't understand what is normal or what they ideally should be intaking. What would you recommend?
So amount of ounces
Fluid.
of water.
Yep.
So a very simple equation to start with would be your body weight in pounds, divide it by 2. So if you're 200 pounds, that's 100. Aim to drink about 100 ounces of fluid a day. There are stipulations, right? So like we talked about, if you're exercising a lot, if you're sweating a lot, replacing the water, replacing the electrolytes. Some, again, everyone is unique. Some individuals, with heart or with kidney conditions, might be less, right? Again, check with your healthcare provider. That's a pretty general recommendation. But if you're over here saying, okay, my target's 100 and I'm drinking 3 cups of water a day, right? You're not quite there. But also thinking about what it is that you're drinking. So remember that alcohol probably doesn't count very well there. In terms of caffeine, if you're having a cup of coffee in the morning, fine. If all you're drinking all day is caffeinated coffee, caffeinated tea, that might be having a negative impact on your hydration status. So if that's challenging for you to just drink plain water, that's okay. You could try adding, make it what I call spa water, add some berries, some mint leaves, maybe you try herbal teas. So there are different ways to make it a little bit more palatable. There's also apps on your phone. I don't know if you've ever used one of these, but they'll like ping, like time to drink water. And you're like, oh, okay. Like sometimes all you need is a little reminder.
Yeah, absolutely. And, cucumber water is wonderful, very refreshing, especially in hot summers.
Yeah.
So that's another
Yeah.
one too.
And an added bonus, right? If you're staying more hydrated, you're going to be getting up more often to go to the bathroom. So
You are, that could be an added bonus. Some people might not see it that way. And that's one important thing to kind of point out to individuals too. If you haven't been drinking a lot, don't go from 10 ounces to 100. You are going to be in the bathroom all day long. So kind of do that gradual increase, let that bladder kind of adjust to that a little bit. So,
and one other thing, that's so valid. One other thing I would say is, as a reminder, you can drink too much water.
Yeah.
Again, I really, I worked in fitness for many years, so I think it's probably more relevant to that industry. But I hear people saying a lot, oh, I'm trying to drink 2 gallons of water a day. Again, we have to have that balance of the electrolytes and the fluids. So more and more and more and more is not always better. As with everything else, we want to find that sweet spot.
Yeah, absolutely. And then my third thought is we do want to address the abdominal and pelvic floor restrictions. Restrictions in these areas, a lot of these organs that say stool goes through, they're very tubular. And so it's kind of equates to kind of a water hose in a way. Instead of fluid going through, you have something solid that's moving through. And so when we have fascial restrictions over and in and around these organs, it's kind of like putting your foot on a hose. Things can't flow through as easily. And so we want to also address those fascial restrictions, lift the foot off the hose. And what that's going to allow greater motility of those organs. It's also going to allow things to pass through much easier. So having someone look at that fascial aspect can be really beneficial.
Just out of curiosity, Amy, do you ever see it go the other way, where someone might have diarrhea or loose stool, like the opposite symptom from that same cause?
It can impact them in both ways. But I think that probably we can see it a lot with the constipation. It also is impacting diarrhea, but I feel that both of those also have more to it than just the fascial issue.
Sure.
A lot of what you're talking about as well. It's not uncommon that we, it's interesting because in the log format, we're going back to the graphic stool talk. In the log format, typically it's going to come out pretty straight. But sometimes there are going to be kinks and there's going to be things like that. A lot of times my mind goes to many times is, could that be a fascial restriction in that area that has now compressed something that has been sitting in that colon for a while? Could be. Yeah.
Interesting.
Anywho. So, well, I'm going to check the chat one more time for any comments. I know that we had someone thank us, you and me, for bringing this to people's attention. She had a functional medicine nutritionist and doctor identify a lot of what you've said. And those things helped her incredibly after very difficult cancer treatment with a great deal of gut and bowel issues afterward. I'm so glad that you did find benefit and found someone that could support you during this time. That's wonderful to hear.
Absolutely.
If there's no more questions, I absolutely want to thank Kaytee for joining me tonight. I love the conversation. I think it is something that is so useful for so many people, and I hope that all of you have found it to be helpful. Kaytee, do you have any last comments as we're closing up for today?
No, just thank you so much for having me on for this conversation. And, again, I just want to keep spreading that message of hope.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. And if any of you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to us via email. I have put both of our emails in the description. So if you have a question specifically for Kaytee, you can get her email from the description, or if you have something for me, mine's in there as well. But as always, we will be back in 1 month for our next live. So keep watching and have a good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.